Hi, this is Christine Alcazar, and this is my presentation of the issue of is preferring a certain race a fetish or a personal preference. So, race impacts a lot of intimate aspects of our lives, such as sex, dating, love, etc. But specifically, a racial fetish is a person's exclusive or near exclusive preference for sexual intimacy with others belonging to a specific racial group. For this presentation, I will be going over yellow fever, which is a common racial fetish where it is a preference for Asian women and men. So the origins of Asian fetishism come from the military occupation of East and Southeast Asia, war brides, sex tourism, etc., and which gave way to hypersexualized stereotypes such as the dragon lady, who is seen as seductive, mysterious, and domineering, and the lotus blossom, who is seen as innocent, domestic, and submissive. This coincided with the sexual model minority myth, where Asian women's sex appeal and strong work ethic, as well as their double feminization for being seen as innocent and docile, made them seem like a sexual model minority. The negative impact of Asian fetishism were basically where they feel love, where they question whether they're loved as individuals or objects, and the hypersexualized racial stereotypes cause Asian women to go through sexual harm such as objectification, harassment, domestic violence, and rape. And 41 to 61% of Asian women report experiencing physical and/or sexual violence by an intimate partner in their lifetime. And this is higher than any other ethnic group, and also Asian survivors are least likely to speak out because of cultural, institutional, and individual constructs. Racial fetishes depersonalize and otherize the victims, causing them to go through psychological trauma because of their race, where they begin to question if they are replaceable. They have doubt, suspicion, and insecurities because of how they're exoticized and hypersexualized. So the person story I found was Harvey Weinstein told me he liked Chinese girls. So I'm pretty sure you recognize the man on the right. He's an American film producer, co-founder of Miramax, Harvey Weinstein. But you may not recognize the woman on the right. Her name is Rowena Chu, and she described herself as ordinary and just an unfamous woman trying to do her job. Rowena Chu graduated Harvard in English literature and dreamed to work in the film industry. Hollywood to her seems like an unattainable dream, and even though her boss was said to be inappropriate during the job interview, she was just told to handle him robustly. And Harvey Weinstein ended up grooming her and testing her limits because he could make or break her career because of the power he held in gender, race, seniority, and wealth, because he used his dominance in the film industry to claim sexual favors. And before he tried to rape her, he stated that he's never had a Chinese girl. And Harvey Weinstein was a multi-millionaire and a power player in the film industry, and she just entered the industry being a Chinese woman, which made her seem inferior. And when she attempted to report Weinstein, she was pressured to sign a non-disclosure agreement where she was basically bought to, to her silence was basically bought, and she was unable to find work after leaving Weinstein. Please, he told me, just one thrust and it would all be over. Senior executives did not believe her. Police laughed at her face. Her silence was bought, and for 21 years she lived in constant fear of Harvey Weinstein because of what he could do to her. And after 21 years, she spoke her truth, which caused Weinstein to attempt to sue her, where he just said that they had a 6-month physical relationship, which wasn't true. And the guilt from what has happened to her led her to have 2 suicide attempts. And no one wanted to employ her in LA, so she had to move back to Hong Kong. Therefore, I believe preferring a certain race for an intimate relationship is a racial fetish because of the harm it causes towards those of that race. The counter-argument to a racial fetish is that it's just a preference, and this is supported by the mere preference argument and the concept of minimal race. The mere preference argument just states that there's nothing morally objectionable about sexual preferences for eye color or hair color. Preference for racialized physical traits are no different than non-racial phenotypic traits. Mere preferences for racialized phenotypic traits are not morally objectionable. And the concept of minimal race demonstrates how humans are divided into groups of phenotypic traits and geographical ancestry without emphasis on any physical, mental, or moral traits. So basically, it states that preferring like blonde hair and blue eyes is not morally objectionable, so there is nothing wrong with it. So having this mere preference, which is uncontrollable because it's just aesthetically pleasing to you, there's nothing wrong with it. And then my proposal is that ways that we can help personally is to stop dehumanizing individuals and stop basing our beliefs on stereotypes. We can recognize that we can control whether we take responsibility for our sexual desires and reevaluate any preferences we seem to have and acknowledge whether we are acting on a racial fetish. Organizations such as the Me Too movement and the National Network to End Domestic Violence provide a safe space for victims, information to better understand the struggles victims face, as well as ways to support these victims. By viewing their websites, you can learn how to act and better understand to help those who have been sexually harassed and are abused. So these sexual identities are based on choices whether we act on sexual desire, and they are interpreted, endorsed, and are transformed through our own capacities, therefore making it not just an aesthetically pleasing preference, because we end up thinking on it and acting on it, so we have control over it. So we can choose to not let it harm those it stigmatizes, so that we could choose not to make victims make them feel like they have to be flattered for us preferring them, because that is morally objectionable. So having a racial fetish or personal preference does not excuse the harm it does to one's victims. And these are my references.